perfect security for Symbian smartphones, because there were several examples of Symbian sign malware, for example. Like the first one was in the beginning of 2009, it was YXC, or
well, even before the Plexus one was signed.
So one more example, please.
I don't have an answer for it.
What do you think we should do?
But no, hold on a second. I don't have the answer. I can lay out a research agenda centered heavily in the situation you described, centered very heavily on the study of information theory. I think is sort of the foundation of much of it. That said, I'm not creative enough to come up with the answers. I'm hoping that maybe somebody in the audience may listening has some answers, has some insights. We're a long way off, and I think this sort of gets to very fundamental challenges of the human. And humans are always the weakest link. How can we use technology to help us protect ourselves against ourselves? But I think anybody who tells you, increase our market share is lying to you.
Okay, we're going to take a couple of questions from the floor. I'm going to start with my right, because that gentleman walked up first, and then we'll go to center and to left hand one.
So I have one small observation and then a question. So I hope you don't mind. I'll just. The observation is basically that we were talking earlier about the fragmentation of the mobile space, and the thing is that on the PC, your operating system is a third-party add-on. It's coming from pretty much one vendor. We know that there is market share for something else, but it's pretty much the same thing on every single PC, no matter what hardware configuration, no matter where you buy it from, whether it's Dell, Epson, or whatever piece of the puzzle your peripheral or whatever it's come from. It's basically operating the same thing. But mobile phones, there's no incentive for them to go back and update, a Samsung Galaxy phone 2 years ago, because they want to sell you the new phone with the latest operating system, and it's their particular flavour of Android or that kind of thing. So I think some of the things that you were talking about rely on that, which actually, to me, drives the data stealing activity much more into the cloud. And that's where we really need to start thinking about things that Mikko has been saying. Things like the fact is that people are going to be persuaded to go and click on things and go and do stuff that is injurious to their security. So my question really is, do you think that some of the problem, and this actually comes partly to what Vixie was just saying, it's actually part of the problem is that we're old. Most of us in this room grew up in a generation where we didn't really experience from the very youngest age the sort of things that my children are experiencing now, being online constantly, expecting to be able to go somewhere and be still online. We'll sit in a restaurant and my son will be aggravated if he can't get on Facebook. We're in a restaurant, for God's sake, just don't think about being on Facebook now. But that's the thing that they've grown up with and we didn't. So it's part of the problem patching the human, and the fact that the cloud is one part, mobile is one part, malware is one thing. It's all there, but really the fundamental problem is that still people are going to do stupid things. And is there much more need to look at it from the perspective of, well, in 30 years' time, everybody will have grown up with this stuff, and therefore the solutions might well be different and based much more on knowledge of how things work.
So that's where I was trying to get to with the idea of studying information theory for trying to understand security and protect things. If we can look at what is carried and express what is needed by another piece in the chain to adequately protect the rest of it, then I think that's sort of where I want to get to. That's a very abstract, fundamental concept here. The idea is to sort of fully understand what is there and what is needed at the next piece. I identified this 6 or 7 years ago now with Web 2.0 nationals, right? The security implications there, the information leakage. And so
we certainly have, to go back to what Paul Vixie said, a terrible shiny object problem. And it astounds me that one of the most successful ways to propagate something that has ill intent on Facebook is the simple expedient of making it sound like such a shiny object that people are prepared that you'll see this object, you'll love it, and you'll recommend it to all your buddies. But this is so shiny that in this case we want you to do it the other way around. So you click the recommend button, then you see what it is you're going to recommend. And that's a sort of behavior that sort of no technology can really solve. And I don't know how in 30 years' time, could well be worse, because the objects will be, even shinier. So they'll certainly be really tiny.
It's a problem of awareness and education.
Well, one thing I've learned in the 20 years, or almost 20 years in the industry, is that education is a waste of time. People never learn. They will always double-click on every single executable. They will always type their credit card number to any form that asks for it. Education is a waste of time.
Okay.
It's actually pity that everyone applauded that. I mean that from the depths of my heart. That's quite sad. People can change their behaviours, and they can learn to change their behaviours, and with a little bit of regulatory help, they can adapt them. A good example this has not happened too much in Australia, but in the United Kingdom, drink driving, for example, is now socially unacceptable. If you get caught, your mates will not go, "Oh, damn, you got busted by the cops." They will go, "You clown, you could have run over me." So people can change their views and they can change their behaviours. And you can argue that, well, if people won't learn, it's either the fault of the people being educated or it's the fault, unfortunately, of the educators.
I disagree. I think it's not about education. I think it's about the next generation taking over. They grow up with that stuff. The next generation that grew up thought that drink driving is bad. The old generation probably still doesn't. Same thing with the internet. The people who are growing up, the next generation from us, who don't remember the time before Google, who are wondering how ever we got along without Google. Well, those are the ones who get this much better by heart than what we did in our generation now. So I guess it's not about education, it's about growing up in this.
There is, and I know this from a session I was at in Sydney recently, where some sort of youngsters came from nearby schools, that there is a minority a sizable minority of school kids who do have some deep concerns which they can vocalise about privacy and things like Facebook, like whether it's okay if you got someone to snap a picture of you with your buddy, whether you should ask them before you put it online. And some of them get it. Unfortunately, they are still quite a silent minority because, I guess, peer pressure and the fact that they are a silent minority. So I think that with encouragement you can change behaviour, and I don't think for a moment that we should just go, well, we're going to seek a technological solution. So I don't think that from trying to persuade people to do the right thing, if you can get one person to do it, then you have at least succeeded in part. So I don't think we should just dismiss education. I don't think we should applaud the idea that users are losers. I think that's a little bit of a kind of a smug, self-satisfied sort of losing argument. Not that I feel strongly about it.
So any thoughts on behavior change?
Actually, yeah. So, I think that there's, Paul, you sort of convinced me of something, believe it or not.
Let the streaming get into it. Okay, I'm just taking the time count.
So I'm reminded. So I read this morning in regards to Facebook, 2 points. One is most people play Farmville because their friends do, not because they like it, but because their friends do. And the second thing is a comment I read recently about Facebook as well, which is to say that if you are not being charged for using a service, you are the commodity. And I think that, so to the point of social change, I think that an increasing number of people are starting to, small, but an increasing number of people are starting to understand this exception, which is to say, the act of sharing benefits somebody else. Do I really want to do this? Or could harm somebody else or even harm me? Do I really want to do this? I think that it may take some time, 10, 20 years. It took a long time for drunk driving, for example, to become socially frowned upon.
You know how some states in the US have taken lead and quite gung-ho about sort of protecting consumers in things like the liability they carry with banks, about forced disclosure of breaches just because they're tired of them being swept under the carpet. It'll be California and New York for the main drivers in that. Maybe what would be nice is some kind of regulatory pressure that services like Gmail, Facebook and the like may not advertise themselves as free, since they actually come with potentially very large cost indeed. Which is, I guess,
a lot of clever lawyers who I think are in a mass about it.
No,
really well.
If it's sort of that's just what you said about you the user become the commodity. It's sort of that seen the other way around. That people they don't realise the potential cost of free, and when they do, then they kind of get it in a real epiphany moment.
Well, if we talk about human vulnerability, let's say like this, I think that education is useful because I've got a lot of like real life examples when I was talking to people and saying, so please don't do this because now it's some kind of epidemic of this Trojan or this worm. People listen and people understand that they shouldn't do this or that thing, and I think that education is really necessary according to preventing and patching human vulnerability.
Thank you. I think we'll take a question from the floor.
So the Apple App Store is a sort of a mandatory whitelist for iPhones and other like devices. It's not clear what the security checks behind that whitelist are, but it is a whitelist. What does the panel think about whitelisting as a solution for all the different mobile platforms?
And I'll add an addendum to that. What about the Android App Store where there isn't any checking done per se? How does that play out?
I think, and I can just start with this answer. There's a definitive answer to that, in my opinion. That there is no one technology which provides the solution, and to demonstrate that to yourself, you just need to consider the halting problem. You cannot write a program which will always reliably determine the behavior of the programs. So, in my opinion, there's nothing that should be ruled out. But you're always, for security, you're always going to need defense in depth and some sort of hybrid approach which minimizes, the sort of bit that gets through the sieve at each level.
I find the App Store model fascinating, and of course, just the basic idea behind it kind of works. I mean, so far we haven't seen any directly malicious applications in Apple App Store. We've seen them in other similar systems, but not there. And it's fascinating if you think about Microsoft who tried to pull the same thing off. Imagine Microsoft shipping Windows 8. And here we have Windows 8, and by the way, in Windows 8 you can only run the software that we bless. You can't run any other software that is accepted by Microsoft. And of course, nobody would buy it. People would hate the idea and bury Windows 8. That's never going to happen. Yet, people seem to be perfectly happy accepting exactly the same idea on their mobile phones. And of course, these App Store models aren't foolproof.